teacher talk session tonight. And tonight we are going to have another educator from different part of the world. And tonight our educator is a language educator and a writer, Daniel Costa. And when he comes, we are going to start our live session with him. Daniel, I think you are here. You can send me a request. Yes, I saw it. Thank you. I have accepted. Hey, yes, I accepted, Daniel. I'm waiting for the connection. Yes, I received. Sorry about this. Waiting for Daniel. Yeah, it's strange, Daniel. Yeah, I can see it. Hello?
Hello, hello. How are you?
Can you hear? Can you see me?
Not see, but I can hear you. It's fine. I think we can continue like this.
But it's interesting, you know. And I can see you in my screen, but I think the audiences can see us, but we can't see each other.
It's okay. Maybe we can just continue like this.
All right. So if it's not a problem for you, we
No,
can have the session like this.
it's fine for me.
Is a problem?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so hello Daniel,
Hey,
and
Costa.
it's great to have you here. It's great to have you in our Teacher Talk session, Teacher Talks 139. And so I would like to say before starting the live session, I would like to say thank you very much for accepting my invitation for Teacher Talks. It was a great honor to have you.
Well, I'd like to thank you and congratulations for putting on this talk show for teachers. I think it's a nice way to share ideas and to share our passion for teaching. So thank you. Teşekkürler.
Oh, you are welcome. You are welcome. Okay, so if it's okay, I think we can start it.
Yes, yes.
So, are you ready? Okay. So I know about you, Daniel, but maybe our audiences would like to know about you. And can you tell us about yourself, please, and a bit about your experiences too?
So just one thing. Somebody says there's a problem with my mic.
Or maybe if you
Yeah,
want,
without the mic.
you can
Yeah,
take
exactly.
out your microphones. What about now?
Yeah. Is it better? Someone said it seemed like AI, so hopefully it's better now.
Okay. Okay. Now I can hear you clearly.
Somebody says they can't hear me clearly.
No. Now it's okay. I can hear you very clearly.
Okay. Somebody said they couldn't, but great.
But yeah,
Fantastic. Thanks
they say it's okay now.
thank you to the listeners.
All right.
Okay,
Now they say better. All right. So let's back to
great.
the questions then. Can you tell us about yourself, please, and a bit about your experiences too?
Yeah. So I've been teaching for 10 years, and we will talk a bit about my experiences throughout this interview. So it's been a joy to teach for 10 years students from different countries, and I've also taught several languages. Although most of the time English, that's the language I've been teaching most of the time. And a bit about my cultural background. So I'm very mixed. I was born in the UK, London,
Mm-hmm.
to Italian, Portuguese parents. And then I grew up in France, and I've lived in 8 countries. So after France, I lived for some time in Switzerland and in Spain, and also in Portugal, Brazil, several years in Greece, and then Croatia. And of course, I've also traveled to many countries for work and for personal reasons, and this has really helped me to see the world with different eyes, and have really contributed to who I
Mm-hmm.
am today. So been working a lot as a teacher, but also as a writer for several magazines and journals, and also
Wonderful.
encyclopedia. Last year for Encyclopedia Britannica, they uh, invited me for a project, and several articles were commissioned by them. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's about it.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Wonderful. And so, just a moment. I have something to do here. Oh, okay. Hmm, all right. Okay. So, thank you very much, Daniel. So let's move to another question. So, what was or were your turning point or points in your own education?
So I think the first major turning point, especially as regards ELT, English language teaching, was CELTA. This is starting point for many teachers. And I took my CELTA in 2014, and it was a very nice experience because it opened my eyes to several different aspects of English language teaching. It was quite intense, as you probably know from your experience also doing that course. It lasted a month. It was the face-to-face one. I know that nowadays there are many online versions of the CELTA and also hybrid version, but this one was the face-to-face one, so it's quite intense. Not a lot of time to sleep, but it was nice because it opened my eyes to many different aspects of ELT. And although I had already worked as a teacher before that in Portugal and in Brazil, it really helped me to understand the practical aspects of language teaching. So that was a starting point, especially because after I finished my CELTA, I got 3 job offers on the same day from different schools. The day after I finished the CELTA, I think. So it really proved that that course can be quite useful, not just to learn, but also to open doors, so also for career opportunities. After that, an important turning point for me was my MA in ELT.
Wonderful.
So many people actually have to decide, there's a dilemma. Should I do a Delta? Should I do an MA? I know that it's a common doubt that many teachers have. But actually, I chose the MA because I wanted to really understand the theory behind what I was doing. The Delta is a bit more practical. Of course, there's theory, but CELTA is, of course, even more practical than the Delta. But the MA seemed more interesting for me because I really wanted to understand the theory behind what I was doing. What's communicative language teaching? What's task-based language learning? What's the lexical approach? What did Vygotsky say, for example? And so because the CELTA was very practical, many questions were left unanswered. So after having worked for some time, around 2 years, I wanted to answer these questions. So by doing the MA at the University of Southampton, I was given this opportunity to find answers to all of these questions. And it was really fascinating because I was exposed to all the theories of Chomsky and Krashen. And some people might think that theory is not so useful, but in my opinion, it's very useful because it helps us to reflect on our own pedagogy, especially because a lot of the things that we do are based on theories, things that were written by other people and researched by others. And this really helps us to compare what we do with the masters of the past, regardless of whether we agree with them. So that was also an important turning point. And then, as I was already working as a teacher, I've worked for many years, especially in the field of business English, ESP, English for specific purposes. I've worked for a long time online.
Wonderful.
Students around the world, although mainly Europe and especially France, because the school is headquartered there. But another turning point is actually not related to ELT directly. It's more related to another area which I've always been interested in, which is philosophy. So I know this might sound a bit strange, but after taking this MA in ELT, I ended up doing a BA in philosophy, part-time BA in philosophy, which really helped me to understand many different aspects of reasoning, because all of these teacher training courses that we do and that I did, because I also did business English teaching course. I also did the COLT, the Certificate for Online Teaching. All these other courses are very interesting in terms of teaching, but I think that philosophy can also be very important for us as educators, because it can help us to reason properly and to be able to understand which aspects are more reliable than others. So I think this BA I did in philosophy was really, really interesting, not just for personal reasons, but also for my teaching. And it's something I did part-time because I was already very busy teaching. And
I
then I did
understand.
another MA, also part-time, and that's the final turning point I'd like to share with you, which was this MA I did in history, also part-time because of my intense teaching schedule. But this MA really opened my eyes to research because when we work in the field of history, we have to work with a lot of primary sources. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, when I wrote my dissertation, I worked with sources from more than 10 countries, national archives from more than 10 countries in 6 different languages. And this was fascinating because, especially the field that I was approaching, which was global history,
Mm-hmm.
and that helped me to understand the importance of research. In our profession, research is quite important because sometimes, we read an article which is maybe related to a specific context, and we want to know a bit more about it. To what extent can that be, true for another context? So research is really important for us to be able to gather information, data, to be able to make the best decisions. So I think these two things that I studied later, philosophy because of the power of reasoning, and then history because of all that research, these really helped my language teaching as well.
Wonderful. That's a great, really. And by the way, Daniel, thank you very much for sharing your turning points. And you had a huge, the turning points in your career. Really great. Thank you for sharing them. And what I'm gonna ask you next about is about kind of related to your experiences. Like, I know that you have been teaching for a long time, and probably you have tried different techniques, different methodologies, and different strategies in your lessons. Okay, and probably you have all these experiences. You have a philosophy about teaching. So, what is it? What is your philosophy of teaching?
Well, thanks for this question, and it's good that you mentioned the fact that I've been teaching for a long time. But I suppose there are teachers connected who've been working for more than 30 years. That's almost my age. So, 10
I
years,
see.
but yeah, it's all relative, right? So,
Yes.
in answer to your question, I recently, during the pandemic, I did some more courses, and that's actually an interesting thing. Is that when you teach different languages and you take courses to improve your skills teaching another language, that can of course help you to teach English.
Uh-huh.
So I did this course in Spanish language teaching at the University of Barcelona. That was online, and it was a postgraduate diploma. And one of the really fascinating aspects of this course was the fact that we talked a bit about what you just said, the philosophy of teaching. And I remember they talked about each lesson being an experience for the learner. Yeah, and I'd go
Mm-hmm.
further. I think it's a bit like a journey. You want to take learners on a journey with you. And in this respect, especially in my context, because as I said, I work with learners for specific purposes, so people who work in different fields, different companies. So our lessons are typically related to their needs. So learners have very specific needs sometimes. I've worked with learners from the aeronautics industry, from the cosmetics industry, from the banking industry,
Yes.
insurance industry. Yeah. More recently, I've worked with learners who work in the Ukraine with the refugees. So I've worked with all sorts of I mean, not all sorts of learners, but many sorts of learners. And so, in this respect, I think lessons should be learner-centered. This is really important. When you have a classroom and you work face to face, like I think you do,
Yeah.
it's a bit difficult to please everyone, right? In my context, because lessons are generally one-to-one and they're for specific purposes and their business, they have to be really tailored to the students. It's different from a class where you follow a specific syllabus, course book, and where you have to, follow a specific curriculum as well. So I think it's important to bear this in mind. So in my context, lessons are learner-centered for sure,
Mm-hmm.
and I also think that this is based, of course, on things I've studied at the MA and things I've observed. I think the authentic element of lessons is really important, and this is strongly related to the whole communicative language teaching approach, which started more or less in the 1970s. So basically, when I talk about lessons being authentic, doesn't mean that, you know, there's a human being instead of a robot. Of course, for now, I think we're still around. I'm talking more about the material that we use. So in my case, because I'm not dictated by a specific course book, I have the freedom to create many different lessons and activities based on authentic resources. And this has been very useful for students from different areas. For example, recently, IA TEFL Voices, they published one of my lesson plans on sailing, where I used an article from the New York Times, and I adapted it and created a task-based lesson plan for students from the sailing industry who needed to learn these things because of their profession. So when I talk about authentic resources, is using materials from the BBC, National Geographic, New York Times, The Economist, if I'm working with students from banks, for example, although The Economist covers many different areas. So basically using things that are related to how people use English in the real world. And this also includes songs. Yeah, I'm also a musician, so for me it's a pleasure to be able to include songs in my classes. And as you probably know, as perhaps you've already done, including songs can help them to improve their vocabulary, their listening skills, also grammar. I've used songs to help people improve their grammar, and many teachers do this as well. I know that they do. So this is what I mean by authentic. And more recently, there's this whole hype related to podcasts. Yeah, so podcasts can be very useful as well. Yeah, as long as they're not too long. Yeah, we can't, you know, propose something that's 20 minutes long. So typically things that are less than 7-8 minutes, I think, are good for lessons. So I think lessons are typically learner-centered and authentic. Basically, our goal is to make students travel to the English-speaking world in our case, because we teach English. Yeah, and so this is why, for example, in our lessons, there's often a section of my class where I include a photo of an English-speaking place, and they have to guess where it is. And this also helps them to improve their grammar, because asking questions can be tricky in English for many students. So the English-speaking world is very diverse. As you know, there are more than 50 English-speaking countries. So there's plenty to choose from. I do this activity with other languages, but with English, we really have lots to choose from. It's not just England or the USA or Australia. As you probably know, they talk a lot about the inner circle, the outer circle. We must include all three circles. Yeah, the expanding circle as well, although the expanding circle doesn't typically include English-speaking countries, but the inner and outer circles do. And so it's important to show students that English is a very diverse language in the sense that it's the language of countries like Jamaica, Nigeria as well. Yeah, not just England and the USA, the UK rather.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daniel. Really, it's really useful philosophy about the philosophy of teaching. Really, the wonderful ideas you mentioned here. Thank you very much, your experience also. And I really wonder something about my next question. And you have lived and, you know, worked different countries, if I'm not wrong. And when you think about the countries where you lived and work, and which one was challenging for you, and how did you cope with it?
Tough question here. Well, all countries have their challenges, as you know, but Croatia was the most challenging for me because of many situations and hurdles. Although it's a European Union country, very often I felt like I was treated as if I wasn't an EU citizen in many situations. And so we also have to bear in mind that the Balkans in the 1990s were the stage of cruel wars, as you know, genocides, wars. So I think this still impacts the frame of mind of many people. And of course, like in other places, there are very nice people, but there were lots of situations where I felt that certain things which were easier in other countries, like Greece, for example, where I lived many years, things that could have been perhaps easier were very difficult in many situations. I was also discriminated in many situations for being a
Oh,
foreigner or not speaking the language. Makes sense because it's a country where less than 2% of the population is foreign. So, and then of course the language plays an important role, I think, in wherever we are. Yeah. But for example, I've been to your country many times, to Turkey, and although I've been, I think I told you, I've been in many situations where people didn't speak English, but still there was
I
always a willingness
remember.
to help. There's always a willingness to help, and I've always been welcomed in a positive way in Turkey and in many other countries. I've been to more than 70, and I've lived in these 8 months. And Croatia, of course, I've also had some positive experiences, yeah. But there were also some pretty nasty experiences that I've had. But coming back to languages, the Croatian language is a very difficult one. And so a challenge for me was also learning the language. And I said to myself, by learning the language, I will perhaps overcome these hurdles. But it's complex because although it's such a small country compared to yours, for example, or to compared to many others, there are many different dialects. Yeah, each region has their own dialect. Sometimes every island has its own dialect. So I remember when I was living in Greece, for example, I learned the language by acculturation. This means that you learn it by exposure, just by listening, by speaking. I had many Greek friends, and some people were very surprised. You know, how can you learn such a complicated language without studying it? But this is what happened in Greece, and it's not because I'm some genius. I think it's mainly also because I had many people who really helped me. They would speak more slowly for me to understand. In Croatia, it was a bit different because even when I started speaking the language well, by taking classes at university, people would still notice that I had a certain accent, so they'd start speaking English, yeah, or they wouldn't even speak, yeah. So, it was a big contrast compared with Greece. But in any case, it was very interesting. The Croatian language is a very interesting one. It has 7 cases, as opposed to Greek and German, which have 4. And as opposed to German and Greek, the main words. This is interesting, maybe for many of the linguists here.
I see.
That the word changes in Greek and in German only with the genitive case, the genitive case, whereas with Croatian it changes all the time. Yeah, so this makes grammar quite complex. So you have to get used to it. But it was definitely a challenge, and in some respects a positive challenge. Yeah, because learning the Croatian language was also new for me because it was my first Slavic language. Many words are similar to Russian. And this was definitely new ground for me.
I see. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Daniel, for the telling this difficulties with us here and sharing it. Let's move to would you like to add anything else, or can I move to another question? But it's really great to listen to you, by the way.
Feel free. I can't see you, so I can see a black screen. So, but yeah, I hope you can hear me. I don't know if you can see me. I think you can't.
No, either. I can see you and hear you. Not on my phone, but on my computer. I open the Instagram page, and I can see. I join the live session from the computer, and over there I can see and hear both of us.
Ah, great. But one thing I did want to say is that although I've never lived in Turkey, in your country, I visited your country many times, and this is actually one of my favorite drinks. Do you know it?
What is it? Tea? Chai?
Salad. Salep.
Salep. Wow.
Yes.
It's
And
really
so
nice, especially winter
before our
time.
session, sorry,
Wow,
can you say that?
nice. It's really
Yeah,
great.
because
Yeah,
before
sorry.
our session, you said drink some water, and I said no, I'm going to make some salad.
It's wonderful, Salep. It's great to see it here. It's a wonderful drink for winter
It's
times,
great.
really.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's move to another question then, Daniel. So, if I am not wrong, you are a polyglot, if I'm not wrong. Am I right?
Yeah, what a big
Somehow.
word. Yes, well, I speak 7 languages well and still learning Croatian. So I would say Croatian is almost intermediate level. So B1 is usually considered threshold level. So I would say I'm closely approaching B1, but most of the other languages fluently.
Uh-huh.
Um, Greek and German a bit less than English, Italian, Portuguese, French, and Spanish.
I
But
see.
these are my languages.
I
Yeah.
see. So
But
my
not yet
question is
Turkish.
related, but maybe you will learn it soon.
Yes, yes. I know some words. Yeah, merhaba,
Merhaba.
nasılsın,
Wonderful.
arkadaş. This is a word I heard a lot in your hospitable country.
Arkadaş.
Arkadaş. Everybody says
Friend.
arkadaş, friend. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
nice word.
exactly. Friend. It's nice to hear it from you, Daniel. So let's move to another question. Like, how has being polyglot, help you to understand your students? Like, you are polyglot, you can talk different languages, and definitely it helps you
Mm.
in this case.
Mhm.
So, how helped you to understand your students?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Azra for her compliment, by the way.
Oh,
But
I just read it. Yeah, TV characters. I think I'm watching cinema. Nice.
Um, so that's an excellent question because learning different languages helps you also to see how languages can be learnt and different approaches that we can use to teach and to learn languages. So I'll speak chronologically, okay?
Sure.
So I'll start with the first three, which I grew up with as a child. So these were English, which was the language outside the house, nursery, uh, television, friends, and the languages of the family were Italian and Portuguese. Italian, my mother; Portuguese, my father.
Wow.
And so I must say I was quite fortunate because I have a couple of friends. I know many people who were born in the UK and other countries who are also the children of immigrants like me, but whose parents didn't teach them their languages, which is a shame. In my case, I was quite lucky because they did, so I thank them for that. But by doing this, I also saw how languages can be learned. So Italian and Portuguese, I learned, you know, I didn't really learn them academically because I was just listening, speaking a bit like I told you about Greek, although I'll come to Greek later. But just by acculturation, and then our holidays were almost all the time spent in Portugal and Italy. I actually discovered the UK later in my life because my parents were so attached to their roots that we spent all the holidays in Portugal, Italy. My first journey by plane was from London to Porto, which is where my father's from, and I was 1 month old. I can't remember that, but apparently. So all of these things, we hear also, we listen to songs and we hear people speaking. All of this, I think, contributes to our brains. Although neuroscientists know about this better than I do. And English was, of course, probably the strongest throughout because although I didn't speak it at home, I think my parents only spoke English when they got very annoyed. They would say, Daniel. But it's the language I spoke at school, the language I learned at school. As I said, I didn't learn Portuguese or Italian academically until later on. We'll talk about this later. But English has been present throughout. Also later when I studied at university, as I told you, philosophy, history, English language teaching, these were all in English. So English has definitely been the most present. But the way I learned Portuguese and Italian were very similar. English a bit different, although it's been the most present in my life. It wasn't the language I spoke at home. So the way I learned English was a bit different. And then when I was 8, we moved to the south of France. So basically, everything that was English suddenly became French. Yes, so the language outside my house was French. The language I spoke with my friends, the language I spoke at school, all of this was in French. But after a few years, my parents realized that if I was always speaking French, I'd forget English. Yes, so they had this idea of putting me in an international school. So this helped me to keep speaking English, because obviously in France, English is not that popular, as you probably know. And so I may have forgotten English if I had just spoken French all the time. So then when I took my IB, I took 3 languages: English, Italian, and French. So this is when I started learning Italian formally during the lessons. So the interesting thing for me is that I never learned Portuguese academically, but then I suddenly took my first degree. My first degree, I didn't talk about it before because it wasn't really related to a turning point in ELT, but because in total I have 4 degrees. So the first degree was actually in music, and this was in Portugal. Yeah, this was in Portugal. And in this period, I spent one of my 3 years in Brazil at Unicamp in São Paulo. And to my surprise, when I wrote texts in Portugal, I could write them as well as my peers, and although I had never studied Portuguese formally. So this proves that sometimes if you learn the language just by acculturation, sometimes you can also reach a very high level. And that was a surprise for me. And when I moved to Brazil, when I lived in Brazil, I very quickly learned Brazilian Portuguese, which is significantly different from Portuguese continent, from European Portuguese from Portugal. And nowadays, when I meet Brazilians, they think I'm Brazilian because I'm so used to speaking Brazilian Portuguese nowadays. I speak it more often than Portuguese from Portugal, European Portugal. But there are significant differences. For example, the gerund is hardly ever used in Portugal, but is often used in Brazil. There are many words, not to mention the pronunciation, which is different, although within Brazil there are also differences in terms of pronunciation between Rio, São Paulo, etc. Spanish is another language I learned primarily through acculturation, but then I wanted to get to know it better. And so I did a course in Granada. And the reason for this is that many Portuguese speakers end up speaking Portuñol, which is a mixture of Portuguese with Spanish, a bit like Franglish for English and French. And so because I wanted to avoid this, I said to myself, no, I've got to learn Spanish the right way. Yeah, so I spent a month in Granada in Spain during a summer. I think it was 2014 or 2013. And that was a wonderful experience in Andalusia. And in that context, I studied Spanish, and I reached the C2 level, which is the highest. So, of course, we're always learning. Sometimes you take a test and you read books and they tell you have a very high level, but we're always learning, as you know. And Spanish is an interesting one because it's spoken in 22 countries, but there are lots of different varieties. Yeah, the Spanish you speak in Argentina is very different from the one you speak in Colombia. So friends of mine who are from Argentina, Colombia, Chile, Mexico, especially Mexico, they have a large population. They can really understand that I learned Spanish in Spain, yeah, because I use the theta, yeah, which is the th sound instead of the s, for example, and there are lots of differences there. And then German is probably my weakest link because I've never lived in a German-speaking country, but I learned it at school. Yes, I know you probably have friends who live in Germany, right? Germany has a large Turkish population or population of people who have Turkish origins, yeah. And so I've never lived in a German-speaking country, but I studied it at school, and then I've often read things in Turkish. In German, not in Turkish. In German, and then of course Greek was learned by acculturation. This was a really magical experience, yeah, because I basically started from scratch when I moved to Greece. Although when we speak English, as I'm sure you know, I don't know if this is the case in Turkish, actually, this is a question for you. I don't know if you use all these words that we use in English, which have Greek origins, you know, like, for example, philosophy, sociology, pedagogy, all of these are Greek
We
words. Yeah?
but we use them. We use them in our language also, like philosophy, sociology, and other words.
And so basically, without knowing, we end up using Greek every day as English speakers. But learning modern Greek was fascinating also because, as I said earlier, I met so many people in Greece who were so generous, yeah, and so kind, and this helps to learn the language. When I studied my MA, there's an interesting concept which is often discussed in our field, which is Krashen's different theories. You know, he talks a bit about, for example, the fact that you need to have a low affective filter to learn a language well. This means
Uh-huh.
low stress environment. So I think Greece was probably the closest to that I've seen because I learned the language in a way where, you know, people would speak slowly or they would really make an effort to communicate. And I think this really helps you to learn the language. So as you can see, by talking about these different languages, I've learned different approaches that then help me reflect on my teaching with my students. And I'll tell you a bit about this later. So the last one I learned was Croatian, and because I had difficulties learning it by acculturation, like the other ones, I felt the need to learn it formally, academically. So this is what led me to apply for a university course.
I see.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so this really helped me. This really helped me. And I don't know if in another life I would have learned Croatian without university lessons, but it definitely is something that needs hard work because of the complex grammar I was telling you about. So how
Wow.
does this help me with my students? Well, it helps me by showing me different viewpoints. And I think it's really important for teachers to learn different languages because it helps them to understand students' difficulties. And also, if we happen to speak the first language of our students, like you with your Turkish students, this helps us to understand their difficulties even further because we can really understand, you know, why are they making that word countable? I know with my French students, for example, for them, bread can also be countable, but in English, it's always uncountable. Bread, yeah? We don't say
Exactly.
a bread,
No,
we
we
say a
don't.
loaf of bread. Exactly, yeah. So all of these things, and then all of the false friends that we have in all these languages, which is fascinating. So I think it really helps us to understand our students learning different languages. And although there are many theories, as you know, people arguing, disagreeing about things, but some people say that teaching students should be like teaching them as if it were
Uh-huh.
their first language. Other people say, oh no, it will never be like their first language. But my experiences, especially, for example, the one in Greece, shows me that we can learn some languages, at least some. I don't want to generalize, but some as if they were our first languages. So it really depends on the situation, and this is where philosophy comes in, right?
Yes,
Not
definitely.
generalizing and not
Mm-hmm.
saying, oh, I've read a study and therefore I'm going to do that in the classroom because those scientists in that study say it's good. No, because every context is different. So it's important to bear this in mind.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I totally agree with you. And by the way, it's the adventure that you have faced with these languages is marvelous, Daniel. Really, I can't imagine. You know, the when I compare to myself, it's really interesting. It's real weird and it's an awesome, really wonderful. It's a great job. It's not an easy thing to do. I'm sure it's not an easy thing. It takes time. It needs time. You know, it needs also hard work to have all these languages and all these experiences. It's wonderful, really.
Thank you. Saul.
You're welcome. Rica ederim. Okay. Would you like to add anything else, or can I move to another
Yes,
questions? But you know, the
I'd love to have a baklava,
ah,
but it's not.
baklava. Okay, I will order you. I'll try to
Oh,
order, or maybe when you come to Turkey next time, if you meet up, so I can
oh,
order.
fıstık sarma, fıstık
Okay.
sarma.
Oh, you're asking me the best one, fıstık sarma.
Yes,
Exactly. Not a
the green
problem.
one. Yes.
Not a problem. Okay. The first time when we meet in Turkey, I'll order them to you. All right?
Thank you, thank you.
You're
Teşekkürler.
welcome. Okay, so let's move to another question. So just let me know, the time flies, by the way, and I just have a couple questions left, and I'm gonna ask you them. And let me ask you the next one. In your opinion, what is the most rewarding aspect of teaching?
Well, there are many, but I think the most rewarding aspect is the fact that you can help people achieve their goals. I've had
Ah,
students, for example, that really needed English to achieve very important goals, like, for example, obtaining a university degree in engineering, for example, or helping refugees in the Ukraine, or
well,
climbing the ladder, yeah, in their specific field. So I think this is the most rewarding aspect of teaching, because sometimes people forget that teachers are really essential to our society. Um, because we've all had teachers. Of course, some people are self-taught, but when you're self-taught, indirectly you have a teacher. You're the teacher. You're your teacher. So having teachers is important, and I'm saying this from the perspective of a student as well. As you know, I've studied a lot and I continue to study. So I'm not saying this in a sort of a self-centered way, because
uh-huh.
I'm also a student and I know that teachers are important. Of course, some teachers are better than others at helping us achieve our goals, but I think that it's really important as a teacher to help the students. And in a way, I think our profession is humanitarian, like doctors, yeah, because we help students achieve very important goals. Some of my students, for example, were doctors, as I mentioned doctors a few seconds ago, and they needed to learn specific terms to help their patients as well. So I think that's for me the most rewarding aspect of teaching, helping students to achieve their goals.
I understand. Thank you very much, Daniel. And that's for your idea about it.
Do
So
you agree?
Daniel, in
Do you
sure, I
agree?
agree. I agree. Definitely, definitely, I agree. I agree with you about it. And you know, in our life, sometimes we face difficulties, and probably when you think about your language adventure, learning the new language adventure you faced, and this is just maybe example for difficult times. And also as a human, we sometimes we face it. So when we face difficult times, and we say like, oh, I wish I could did that this power so I could do that, or I wish I could have that superpower so I could do this easily. But when you think about this in your classes, if you could have one superpower to use it in the classroom, what would it be, and how would it help you?
Well, very interesting question. I think
Uh-huh.
something that is often overlooked in our profession is the fact that we know that students have different personalities, different motivations, different cultures, but there are some very small things related to people and the way people think, which are really important. And sometimes we overlook the fact that some students might have hidden disabilities, for example. Especially in my context, because I worked as an online teacher,
Uh-huh.
synchronous online teacher, it's important to underline the fact that I work as a synchronous online teacher, because I don't work for MOOCs, for example, where you have a forum and you post something and the student replies when they want. My lessons are almost like face to face, but we're in a different area. But it's important to take into account the fact that some students can have disabilities, for example. And this is why, for example, when you work online, sometimes you're not aware that a student might be dyslexic, for example, or that they might have a vitamin deficiency, for example. I remember I had one student who had lots of difficulties concentrating, and I suggested eating something before the lessons because I discovered that he never had breakfast in the morning. He told me, "What's the point in having breakfast?" And I said, "But you need to have some energy. You need vitamins." And then they found out that he may, be vitamin deficient. But in any case, I think it's important. I think that's a very important power to have, being able to know whether there are deficiencies, whether there are disabilities in our students which we don't know of. Because at the end of the day, we're teachers. Yeah, we're humble teachers. We're not medical doctors, nutritionists.
Definitely.
There are things we don't know. But my parents are both medical doctors, and this kind of helped me to understand that health really is a very important resource. And so I think it's important to have this power to understand when a student has an issue. And I mentioned the fact that, online it's even more important because online certain things can be unseen, especially, for example, now I can't even see your face. I don't know where you are. So if it's, I think if it's online, and especially if you don't use the webcam, it's even more difficult to see if a student is having a difficulty. Sometimes you hear a student and you think, oh, maybe they're speaking, they're a calm person. But it can also mean that there's a deficiency or a disability, which is interfering with their learning process. So I think this would be a great power to have. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you, definitely. Yeah, the thing that you mentioned here, I totally agree with you. The same, whatever you say, I agree.
Really? I'm sure you have your opinion.
I have about my opinion, but I agree with yours, but my idea about the superpower that we have in our classes, it's something different. For example, your superpower is like understand them when they have an issue, understand them with your examples. But my one is, probably I would like to have that the reading their mind, that one, like during the courses. Yeah, the mind reading is one of my favorite one, but only about the lessons that we have. Okay, what do they think about it, and what they want to learn, or what part of it missing in their mind, or even when they want to ask questions, but sometimes they can't ask. But I need to get that ideas from them to read their minds.
I agree with you, but what I'm saying is directly related to this, because if a student has a certain deficiency or disorder that prevents him or her to express their opinion, then they will not be able to do it.
Yes.
You see what I mean? Yeah. So we had a question here. How did you deal with medical text?
How did you deal with
this
medical
because of
text?
ESP.
Did you focus on vocab only?
It's primarily vocabulary, but it can also include grammar, yes, because if they're talking, in the present continuous, it might mean something different from, talking in the present simple, because it means it's something that is always there, rather than the present continuous, for example, which is temporary. So it can also include and should include grammar, yes. That's a good question. Sorry, maybe you wanted to come to the questions later. I just saw the
No, it's okay, not a problem. You can answer it if you want. It's not a problem.
But basically, what I said is deeply related to what you said, because if the mind can't function well because of a specific psychiatric disorder or vitamin deficiency, for example, then they can't express their opinion. Sometimes they even have difficulties thinking. So it's really important to address this, because this can also interfere in their learning, with their learning process. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. And
Thanks to you.
so let's move to another question. By the way, just two questions left that I'm gonna ask. Let's move to the what's that? There's something here. There's a comment. Structure and meaning so important in translation to fluent transfer of meaning. Did you read it?
Yes, yes. I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, you agree. So let's move to another question. So let's think that we finished the interview and you step outside your home and find a lottery ticket that ends up winning $10 million. What would you do? Maybe it's not a huge amount for you, $10 million, but for us,
Oh, it is.
it's
Oh, yeah,
really
it is.
huge
It is.
amount.
No, it is. It is a huge amount for me.
I
Yeah,
see.
but I'm not money oriented, so I don't think. But as you probably know, money is not necessarily correlated with health
Yeah,
or cultural wealth. Yeah, money, in fact, in many situations, unfortunately, money is not related to this. Although it can help in some contexts. But if I had that amount, I would invest in projects to help people to fuel education. And I think money can be very useful in many contexts to help people achieve their goals, to help people be able to fulfill their ambitions. So I think money can be spread more evenly, and so I think this amount would go to them and would be invested in education. This is my
I
idea. So I think
see. Thank you.
cultural wealth, intellectual wealth is very important.
hmm I understand. Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move to the last question. I'm gonna ask you my last question. Are you ready for it?
Yes, yes, yes,
The
yes.
most challenging one. Okay,
Mm.
here we go. What is your motto?
My motto is do what you love and love what you do. So I know
Oh,
it
nice.
sounds romantic, but in reality, if people say, just do what you love, sometimes they get very frustrated because they have a very specific objective. Um, and it has to be that specific way. So I think it's important to love what you do, but also to be flexible enough to be able to do what you love, in the sense that some things might go wrong, but then you appreciate the positive aspects of those things. So I think flexibility is important when you do things, and when you have dreams, and when you try to fulfill your ambitions.
Mm-hmm. I see. I understand. But it's like your motto. It's like I have related. I can relate it to the job that we are doing. Actually, I say job, but it's kind of a passion. Like being a teacher. It's something related. Your motto.
Vocation,
Like
yeah, vocation.
no. I mean like teaching. Our job. It's
Yes,
kind
yes.
of
I
like
mean, I mean, it's a
oh
vocation.
yeah,
Vocation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Now I got it. Yeah, it's like we need to love being a teacher, and we need to love to teach, and we need to love to students, and otherwise it's not an easy job to do. It's not an easy
hmm
occupation to do it. Yeah,
Definitely,
so something.
definitely. When I was doing my MA, I had certain colleagues who uh, taught and teach today in Mexico, and they work with 40 students in a classroom, 40 or 50. Yeah. And perhaps we have some people here today who are in the same situation, and it's a tough job. My profession also has its difficulties, being able to work with students who have very specific goals. Sometimes there can be technical issues. Some students can be demanding. There are all sorts of different challenges in our profession, although we work in different fields and in different contexts. So, as I was saying, and as you also said, loving what we do and doing what we love is really important because of this, because this is what helps us to overcome small obstacles which might occur. As you probably know from your work as a teacher, not everything is as smooth as it could be. Sometimes there are things that happen. some social aspects which interfere with our work, and also some cultural aspects, some things that we learn during our courses, our teacher training courses, which aren't necessarily applicable to all cultural contexts, for example. We have all sorts of challenges coming from different directions. But at the end of the day, if we like what we do, then I think it's smoother. And part of liking what we do, part of liking our profession is also liking the people we work with, because our profession is essentially a social job. It's not like, for example, translating a document where you're working mainly with words.
No.
Here it is mainly social, so being able to really appreciate our students is very important. Even though sometimes some students let us down, as you know, that's part of the challenge. But I think it's really important, and especially because of the dreams that students have, and because of their ambitions, and it's nice to see them evolve. I've had some students for more than 5 years. Yeah, they keep coming back, but it's nice to see. It's nice to see that they're interested, and to see that we're contributing to their learning, even after they've reached a certain level where you might feel a bit useless. You're like, what am I doing here? They're already so good. But of course, as I said earlier, we always have something to learn.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daniel, for this great, the ideas, and for about your motto. You talk about your motto. All right. So that's all my questions, Daniel. And before ending our live session, would you like to add anything else?
No. Well, I hope to see you soon in Turkey or somewhere else.
Sure.
Thank you for this invitation, for this interview. Thanks to the people who asked some questions. I don't know if they have more questions, but if they do, they can also communicate with me using LinkedIn, for example. So I wish all the best to everyone.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And before ending our live, I would like to say one more time, thank you very much, Daniel, for being with us here, for your ideas, for your suggestions, and especially for your time that you spend here with us. That was really precious. Time is always precious for everybody, and you spend it with us here. Thank you very much. And Daniel Costa was with us tonight with Teacher Talks and 139. And we are going to be here next week on the same day at the same time, as you know, that every Monday at 9 p.m. in Turkish time. So until the next time, take care of yourself, everybody. And by the way, thank you very much for being with us also here, to all the audiences. And thank you very much, Daniel, for being with us one more time. Take care of yourself, Daniel, and take care of yourself, our dear audiences. And bye-bye, everybody, and see you next week, and peace.
Teşekkür.
Bye.